Hey, good evening, and welcome to another special edition of Labor Vision. This is our first episode for the 2020 Vision for Labor. A new episode will air every week leading up into the 2020 election. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast and to the YouTube video. Charles, what's happening? How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really excited to be a part of this. There's a lot of moving parts for the 2020 elections, and I think it's really important that labor has a seat at that table. So talking to folks that are involved, that know what's going on, I think it's going to be really helpful.
And who's our guest today, Charles?
Our guest is Miss Gloria Llamas. She is the CWA 4123 Regional Vice President from Ann Arbor.
Vice President.
Hey, Gloria.
Hi, everyone.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm great to be on the show and be a part of this important movement.
Gloria is also our legislative chair of the local. She is an LPAT from Michigan. Could you sort of explain what that entails, Gloria?
The LPAT is the important part of trying to keep and keeping our members informed, along with family members and everybody who we can, on how important legislation that is moving on state and federal levels affecting union members affects us, to keep people informed on those issues. And sometimes we do a rapid response when laws go through quickly and no one has the opportunity to the average citizen is not up on that because we're all working so much. So that is part of our job, to keep people informed, educate them, and try to get them involved in the political movement, because through politics and legislation, workers' rights have been, diminished and continue to be diminished. So it's an effort to wake up everyone to be informed and try and get them involved.
And you know what? That's good, because today's show is talking about the right to organize, right?
Yes.
Protect the right to organize, right?
Absolutely.
And Gloria, I know you're up on this, and we want to talk to everyone about this, because this affects all of labor. Remember,
Yes.
When you're a part of a union, you get paid more money to do the same job than somebody that's non-union, and that's a fact. It's numbers, figures attached to that, right? So, but this new bill that has not passed the House yet and has not passed the Senate yet, but is out of committee, correct?
That is correct. That's my understanding, and it's supposedly on the calendar right now, so hopefully they'll vote on it early in 2020. My understanding is it's going to pass through the House, and then it'll head to the Senate, where it probably will stall and die, but we'll get to that later, right?
Yeah, and the thing is you're right, because there's a lot of bills. Let's just be honest about this. A lot of bills are sitting that the House have passed, and the Senate has kind of sat on their hands.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
I believe the House has passed around 400, almost 400 bills, and I think around 80% of those are still sitting in what they call the graveyard over there. So I believe there's around 250 plus that are just sitting, and a lot of those are bipartisan bills that are about women's rights, about stopping foreign interference in our elections, healthcare, a lot of things that everyone agrees with.
Charles, you know what? You just rolled over something really fast I need our listeners to get.
Sure.
Bipartisan.
Yeah.
I want you to think about what you just said, bipartisan. This isn't a Republican-Democrat thing. This is a what? Bipartisan, right?
I know it's shocking, but not everything is black and white, good and evil, left and right, conservative, Democrat. There are things that we can agree on, and that's one of the things that's important with this, the protecting the right to organize, is because there's a lot of things in here that benefit all workers. And Gloria, a lot of times when you start to try to talk politics with someone, immediately their defensive goes up, because it's almost become tribal in a nature that you can't take any kind of criticism or any kind of information that comes from the other side. It's good and bad. How do you approach that with our members and when you're speaking to people?
So what I've done to try and get away from that, polarization that has happened in our nation, is to speak on the issue itself, without people want to know what party I am, who I support. And I try to stay away from that, because I think it shuts people down. And the most important thing that I also am trying to talk to members and educating people is listening to them, but also trying to, when I talk to the majority of people, regardless of their political stance, we have a lot more in common than they realize.
Right.
They think it's unfair that that their rights are going away, that it's no longer mandatory that people get lunch hours. They only get 15-minute breaks. So that's what I try to do is I try to, when it's a piece of workers legislation that's going to affect their pay, how their overtime is, sick time. A lot of people aren't even up on the fact that if their employer says, come to work 15, I want you here, you start to get paid at 8, but I want you here at 7:30 so that you at 7:45 you can turn on your computer or you can stock your truck. That's illegal. You have got to be paid for all of that time.
Right.
And people often are caught in like, I'm just a conscientious worker. Yes. However, when you are supporting a billion-dollar corporation, and this is true, right? The gap between the rich and the working people has grown so much. So much.
It's never been at a higher level since 1929, right before the stock market crash, right before the Great Depression, income inequality.
Right.
It has surged, and there's only so far you can slide on barbed wire.
Right.
Exactly.
So this is where the Protecting the Right to Organize Act comes in at, correct?
Historic piece of legislation, absolutely gigantic.
Yep.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the parts of this, right? Can we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to run through it, Jimmy? You want me to run through it?
Hey, you know what? Here's the one I want to go start. Can I just start it off? Preventing captive audience. You know, a captive audience is when an employer pulls their employees in the room on company time and say, hey, we're getting ready to talk to you why you should not organize. When organization, when the union's organizing, it's when the employer brings them into a room, talks them out of being part of the union, telling them all the benefits of not being in the union is.
Yeah, and it's essentially trying to scare them. And if someone stands up and says, no, I'm not going to listen to this, I don't agree with what you're saying, they can then fire that employee. They don't have any rights. So it's something that needs to be addressed because it's really just propaganda.
And they're paying them to be in that room. So it's not like they're not, it's like, well, your job today is to sit here and listen to me.
Right, about how bad unions are.
Right. And, the people are sitting there. And keep in mind, when they do this captive audience thing, they can promise you $20 an hour, right? And then the election comes to have a union or not to have a union, and you go, man, I really like that $20 an hour. I'm going to vote against the union. The moment that election is done and over with, the employer does not have to give you that $20 an hour. And there's no way you can fight it. You can't go back and say, hey, let me bring the union back in. Let's start this all over again. You have to go a whole year before you start that process all over again.
Talk is cheap. You need a contract to protect you. That's all that, at the base fundamental level, a union is about having a contract that defines the rules, the laws that govern between the workers and the employer, just like we have laws in our country that this is how things are supposed to happen. If they don't happen that way, there's a process involved to make sure that it happens fairly. And I don't know why anyone would have a problem with that. If you think these CEOs that are running these multi-billion-dollar corporations don't have a contract that has contingencies on what they can and cannot do, what they do and do not get, what kind of rights they have, you're crazy. So if the people that have the most resources to defend themselves monetarily need a contract, then why don't the people with the least amount of resources need a contract? And the answer is really simple. They do.
So this prevents the captive audience, right?
Yes,
Correct.
that's part of it.
Okay.
So a lot of the captive audience issue also, when people are in there, they are feeding them false information.
Yes.
It becomes a false narrative. And someone who's never been exposed to a union, worked in a union shop, have no idea. So they believe this nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And preventing that, because if you really think about it, it's just like when we work with our members, the more that we're in their face, and I hate to sound like that, but the more we're touching them, the better we get our point across. We can send an email and the person can go delete on the email, delete on the text. But when you go up and I say, hey, Charles, what's happening? Did you know that we got this rally coming up Saturday, blah, 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 blah. The more that I touch my members, the more they're amped to show up and go, hey, man, you know what you was telling me about that? I understood. I'm here. Because they make a commitment to you personally. They look at you in the eyeball making a commitment. Whereas when they're doing this captive audience, that's exactly what they're doing to these people. Is they're feeding them all of this false information and getting them to agree to something that they really don't need to be agreeing to. I'm going to say it like that.
Yes. And for me, if someone is constantly telling me how bad something is for me and they're the ones that are signing the check, there's that little inkling in the back of my head that's like, why are they pushing so hard against this? And you look at union shops, you make more in a union environment. You look at right to work. I pulled some stats before we started here. In right to work states, there's over a 3% drop in worker pay. 12 of the 15 states with the worst pay gap between men and women are right to work states. And in right to work, 36% more EEOC discrimination charges than non-right to work states. In right to work states, you're almost twice as likely to be injured on the job. So if
because of safety.
Exactly.
Because that's what unions fight for.
If unions are so bad, then why does all the empirical evidence, why does all the aggregate data show the contrary? And it's a real simple answer, because they're not, because unions help workers.
And which takes us to right to work. You were just mentioning that. So according to this new bill, people would have to pay for their representation. Because remember, representation is not free. When you go down and you talk to somebody, you pulling up paperwork, with right to work, it's like, no, you get the same rights as a union member that's paying dues. Well, wait a minute. Somebody has to pay the gas, the person's salary, person's time, the paper that's printed on, right? All that has to be paid, right? So with right to work, there's no pay for that. And Gloria, you and I was Secretary of Treasury at one point in time in our lives. I'm glad I don't have that job anymore. But, but I mean, we knew how much it cost to heat the building up, the union hall that you do the work in, because you can't do the work in. I guess you could do that at McDonald's, but how secure would that be with your information, with your social security number and all that stuff going out there, right? So
exactly.
So the dues enables security for your information. Enable someone to investigate what's going on with you properly, enable somebody to defend you or stand up for your rights. Not so much as defending you from doing wrong, but that point of starting your computer up before you start working. So if I'm a person that gets there at 7:30 in the morning and I wait till 8 o'clock, my start time, to hit the power button on my computer, and my boss is angry about it, that union steward or that union rep is the one that comes in when the person that doesn't want to talk to that boss about it because they're afraid, it's that union rep that goes in and say, well, no, that person is not supposed to start at 8 o'clock. I don't care if they do show up at 7:30. So they will not be hitting that button until 8 o'clock. And so now the supervisor is upset with who? The union rep. Whereas now with the right to work person that don't want to pay dues, well, you know what? Hey, you the union rep. You need to come over here and defend my rights for free.
And Gloria, I'd be curious to get your input on this, because right to work sounds really good, but the caveat to that is that the people that do not pay into the union, that don't pay their dues, you still have to represent them. You still have to treat them like they're a member. So Gloria, when folks come to you and they say, hey, if I don't want to join a union, I shouldn't have to, what's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is, you don't want to pay taxes, but you want the police at your door, the firemen at your door, but you want your neighbor to pay taxes, but you do not.
Right.
It's what helps pay that. But often I tell them, I will represent you, fair that I pay dues to support you. So to support the work that it goes into, the paper, that the company does not pay us to do the investigations. And I guess this goes back to, this new law that's coming in, and people who are unfamiliar with unions have no way to ensure that their discipline is fair. Mm-hmm. And it is laid out even-handedly, so I think that, we can go off into the right to work, but that's the most important part to me, is that everyone shares in the expense that it takes. I mean, and a lot of the work that I've done countless hours, like a lot of people, on my own time. I don't expect to get paid for all of it, but they still need the paper, the ink, all of that it takes to represent people.
And Gloria really embodies a true union worker and a representative, in that she's also our community services chair. She's active in the community. She helps with causes. She works with the United Way. We just helped adopt some families for Christmas. So when you call each other brothers and sisters in unions, it's because the idea of a union is that you're trying to take care of the collective, that the good of the many outweighs the good of the few. So when the few are able to say, well, I don't need to pay dues, it puts a burden on the others that are there doing their fair share. And Gloria, your analogy with taxes is perfect, because if all of a sudden tomorrow you were to say, hey, all Americans, if you don't like how the government's being run, you don't have to pay taxes. How long do you think that we would still have a country?
Right.
We wouldn't.
Right. And with this
The infrastructure would fall apart.
absolutely. And with this new bill, actually what it's doing is it's bringing back something that we have always had. And Gloria, I know you remember this, the agency fee payers. So in other
Yes.
words, you pay for your representation, because at
Yes.
the end of the day, here's the other one. When we negotiate our contract, people aren't negotiating that contract for free. I mean, usually you have to go to a certain city where everybody flies in. It's not always in everybody's backyard, and you have to sit down and negotiate that contract. So somebody got to get paid. What about the union lawyer or attorney that looks over that contract after the bargaining team negotiates it to make sure the wording is right?
That's a good point. And this PRO Act, it's really restoring a lot of the protections that were in the National Labor Relations Act from 1935. So the
Right.
idea that this is all new things that are being thrown in there, it's more of going back to when workers did have protection, when unions were at over 30%, when the middle class was thriving. That's what we're looking to do. It's just to bring back the protections that workers have had for a long time that have been eroded and chipped away at since the 70s.
For example, one of the things that it does is it revises the definition of employee and supervisor. So many companies blur that line, so there's a lot of wage stuff that goes on. And that's that 15 minutes I'm talking about. It's if you're a salaried employee, you can be forced to work 50 hours for the 40 hours of pay. But I mean, even they have some protections. Once you go beyond the 52 hours, they're supposed to compute time or pay you some other things. But this cleans up that language that has gotten blurred over time.
And
If
that's
you're a supervisor, you're over people. If you're an employee, you're a worker bee, like the majority of us.
Right.
And that's a good point when you're talking about things that were put back in. It also gives teeth to some of those charges, because there's a lot of things that are illegal under the National Labor Relations Act, but there's no penalties really for companies that break those. So when it comes to someone wanting to form a union and they come together and they say, hey, we want to form a union at this workplace. What do you think about that? And the company comes out and fires those people. That's against the law. That's an unlawful act. But there's no ramifications for the company. And you can just look at what's happening in the world today with Elon Musk. He tweeted something out talking about what was going on and that it was bad for them and they wouldn't have access to things and be negative ramifications. And it was ruled it was unlawful for him to do that under the NLRA. There was also someone named Dave Portnoy, who's from the media company Barstool Sports, and he tweeted out, if you work for at Barstool Sports and DM this man, who's someone who's trying to organize, I will fire you on the spot.
But there was no ramifications for him.
Even after a judge ruled that it was unlawful for them to do so. And his response for that, gleefully and defiant on Twitter, was, I hope they unionize. And he said, me too, just so I can crush it and reassert my dominance.
Wow. Right. And that's what's happening at the highest. We're unionized at 6%.
Right.
Which is crazy, this country.
Yeah. Remember, Gloria, when it was 12?
Yes.
It was 12 in our lifetime. I mean, in our career, it was 12%. It's half of that.
When I hired in, it was in the 30s. It was like 38%.
Wow.
You know, I hired in 1976 for the company that I work for. But indeed, the constant attack, chipping away at the people's ability to organize and to keep a union, there's a double standard, just like there's a double standard for the rich and a double standard for the working person.
And you know
there's
what?
There's a double standard in the law. And this helps to try and even the playing field.
And this also helps get a first contract. Because a
a
lot of people will vote the union in, and getting that very first contract is impossible because the company is so angry about the union being formed that they just will not negotiate it.
They'll just stall it out.
Right. Whereas we have to go to mediation.
Correct.
For that. So this is really putting teeth in there. The workers are saying, we want the union, we want a fair contract. This helps make that possible.
And to be very clear, if there's a work group that doesn't want to organize and they come in there and they say, hey, we'd like to organize your group. If there's someone in that group that says, I think we should organize, and they go through the process and it gets voted down, That's a wrap.
Right.
It's over. It's democracy in action. There's nothing that forces these people to join a union. But if the majority of them do want to form a union, they have to take that into consideration, because guess what? We live in a democracy.
And it takes a whole year. You cannot, once that union is voted down, it takes a whole entire year for them to be able to bring that back up again.
So this keeps companies from being able to skirt the law, really, where they can just delay, they can put out propaganda,
Yep.
they can fire people, which are all technically illegal.
And they
But
can intimidate, but they have no teeth to it. And
Exactly.
proving it is difficult. It's a well-known fact that a lot of companies out there indeed do that.
yes, and the Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, also gives you the ability to have class action lawsuits to join together to sue the company.
Yes, you can.
So
That
you actually
gives
get
that.
some legal, I mean, the whole thing is just about empowering workers and giving them some legal precedence and establishing a set of rules that everyone has to follow. And if they don't follow them, guess what? There's penalties. Let me throw this at you, right? It's illegal to speed. We've had all kinds of evidence out there that if you go too fast, it can cause accidents. Accidents lead to injuries, and that is a bad thing. Collectively, as a group, as a society, we've decided that.
Oh, okay.
But let's say that the law was that you couldn't speed, but when the cop pulled you over, all they could do was tell you, don't speed, that's wrong, and then they had to let you go.
Oh, that would be nice.
Do you think that would curb speeding?
No, but it
No.
would really be nice. I would like it.
Well, Jimmy, you don't count. But the point being
That's it.
It works. I like that. That should be our next bill.
that's exactly what's happening here. Is all they're doing to these corporations is telling them knock it off, and the corporations don't care. Make me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I would still speed. You're right. I like that.
There's things that you put in place that's for the good of the society as a whole, and that's where these labor laws come from. I mean, that was the point of the National Labor Relations Act to begin with, was to give the workers a fair environment from which to approach their jobs, because the overwhelming majority of Americans are private sector workers.
Correct.
And this bill also protects strikes and other protest activities. This bill make it illegal for employers to permanently replace striking workers and make secondary strikes and boycott legal. So that's, a lot of times when people go on strike, small companies go on strike, what do? They replace the employees, right?
Yes.
When they replace the employees and the people that's in the union that's trying to get that contract, because they're no longer under contract because the contract is up, and the company goes, aha, I got you. This prevents that. They cannot hire permanent employees when they're on strike like that.
And the secondary boycotts part is really important as well, because let me give you an example on that. Let's say that you work for a company and they contract to a larger company. So you're a contractor to that larger company right there. You're having difficulties with your company, so you're going to go on strike against them, but you want to boycott the company that is hiring them to employ you. You're not allowed to do that. You can't go pick at their locations. You can't tell people what's going on. There's laws that prevent that. Why? They're the ones that are paying the company that you work for to hire you. Why do you not have the ability to let people know what's going on? Why are we limiting that speech?
Exactly.
Well, exactly. It also makes it an unfair labor practice to require or coerce employees. And you said this already, Jimmy. Employer meetings that are designed to discourage union members, but it permits class action litigation, and right now you can't. And to take action against economic harm caused by a larger corporation, and working people need more laws in their favor. It allows injunctions against employers engaging in unfair labor practices involving discharge or serious economic harm to an employee.
Which is extremely important. And that involves back pay. That involves getting them back to work in a timely manner. They can't just stretch it out indefinitely. There's some corporations where they'll fire someone and the board will rule that they did so in violation of the law, but then they appeal it and it goes on. It can go on for years. And meanwhile, that person has no job. They have no income. It's been ruled in their favor, but they still don't have any remedy to it. And that takes that away. If a justice delayed is justice denied.
Absolutely. And I think the other important part of it is that when we talk about the National Labor Relation Board, if their teeth have been pulled, often the remedies offered by even them are that they have to post on their bulletin boards for all the employees to read that they'll never do it again. No,
Mhm.
they need to have more of a bite. So
Right.
in this law, it allows any person to bring civil action for harm
Yep.
caused by labor law violations
That's right.
or unfair labor practices. And that's huge. It gives teeth back to not just an organization, to the worker itself, because we've seen in my lifetime have seen such disregard for people and abuse of labor laws, abuse, and outright sometimes the company goes, so take it to arbitration. I don't care. Your person, the average man cannot, working man, woman, cannot sustain what a company can,
Right.
being
Absolutely.
out of work for
Yep.
months and months and months. And the company will take that. I have seen labor relations people tell me, take it. Go ahead. Fight
Yep.
it.
Yep. Because they rather fight it and drain you out of all your money than to do the right thing.
Because is the
Yes.
juice
Yeah.
worth the squeeze? If someone is owed, say, $10,000, arbitrary number, $10,000, but if you're going to take it to arbitration and it's going to cost you $30,000 to arbitrate it, do you do it? Absolutely. Of course you do it. But the net is that it costs you $20,000. And that's how they deplete your resources. That's where the war that corporations are waging against workers are winning, because through attrition, they're just slaughtering us. And back in the day, the corporations, they will always have the money, but the workers had the numbers. But they figured out how to rig the system so that the numbers didn't matter anymore. And that's wrong.
And you know what,
Right.
you all, we have talked about a lot on this podcast. So, let's just do a recap. We talked about it prevents the captive audience, right?
Yes.
It also doesn't blur the lines of management and workers. So it prevents the misclassifications of workers as independent contractors.
Which is super important, because you can say someone's a contractor and then not pay them overtime, and they're not getting paid for the work that they are absolutely doing. I mean, it's just theft.
Yep. It makes bargaining easier. So once a work group decides to be a union group, now the first contract will be easier to get, because if the company keeps saying no, 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 they have to go to mediation.
Yes, and let's talk about that real quick, because at any
Okay.
point, if you want to decertify a union, those workers have the right to do so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As well. So if they decide that this isn't working for us, there's already things in place for them to do so. So no one's forcing them to stay in this. If they decide they don't like it, they can decertify.
Absolutely. It also deals a blow to right to work laws. So in other words, it goes back to the agency fee payer type of agenda, where you pay just for your representation. Because right now, under right to work, you can get union representation and I have to pay for it because I'm the dues paying member, which is unfair for me. It's just like the
Correct.
example you gave with taxes. My taxes pay for the roads and you get to ride your car on these roads and you don't pay a dime.
Gloria's 100% right on that.
Well, and that's meant to break unions, right?
Yes.
That's a union breaking. It breaks unions financially.
And it also helped protect workers' jobs from when it's a strike, them hiring permanent workers to come in and permanently take those jobs while you're negotiating the contract, while you're on the strike, or even during a secondary boycott or strike. It protects the workers on that too. And it also allows, if I'm not mistaken, and I can't find it right now on my iPad here, but it also allows for certain litigation on the rights of the workers, because in some cases the workers couldn't go to court on certain things. Now with this, they can bring these issues right to court and make some things happen.
Gloria touched on that, the civil litigation that they have. And make no mistake, if you do something that a corporation thinks is slander or thinks is liable, they will sue the hell out of you.
Yes, they will.
And they can, what do they call them? Splat lawsuits? I can't remember the exact name.
Oh,
Essentially,
you got
they're
me
just
on that one, dude.
they're a superfluous lawsuit that is baseless in claim, and it's just designed to inconvenience and harm the person that the company is mad at. I could give you a bunch of examples, but we only got so much time.
So this is the PRO Act, the protecting the right to organize, and they called it the PRO Act, HR 2474, and we're telling all of our listeners, HR 2474. That's the one that you want to look for. This is the information on it. Gloria,
Yes.
thank you. Gloria Yamas, Ann Arbor Regional Vice President for CWA Local 4123. Man, it's amazing how I can still remember you guys as local. Thank you for
We're right next door.
right. Thank you for joining us on this Labor Vision podcast. Final question. What is your 2020 vision for labor?
My 2020 vision for labor
Yes.
is that I am able to break through the false narratives that have been set to divide the working people, to get people to look at who truly supports them, to get them to vote, to care enough to know that their vote counts, because that's another lie put out there. Your vote doesn't count. That we band together, working people, because it's truly a war against the working people and the rich.
Amen, sister.
All right. Well, thank you, Gloria. We really appreciate it. Charles Daniels, president of CWA Local 4123.
Thank you,
you, as he is my co-host, and he's going to be my co-host for the whole year. We're doing this all year for 2020. We're going to be having new episodes every Friday and Saturday. We're going to how we got this going, Charles. We got the YouTube. It's going to be Friday, right?
They're going to come out on Friday. There's going to be the individual clip right there and the full episode. You can get them on YouTube, Facebook. The clip is going to be on Twitter. So there's lots of places. Jimmy's got his podcast. We'll be out there for that. So there's a lot of places where you consume this media. And the idea being that we want to engage, we want to educate, and we want to energize going into these 2020 elections.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, American workers first.
Yes, sir.
Go on YouTube. Make sure you type that in. Look at the videos. Great video. And please subscribe, share, and like, especially with the YouTube videos. Subscribe. The more subscribers we got, the bigger the message gets out there. And we need to get the message out there. We need to get the truth out there. So thank you, everyone. Gloria, Charles, I think this has been a fantastic show. I think it is time for us to close this down.
Thank you, Gloria. And hey, real quick, I just want to let people know that Gloria has been a mentor for me as I've been going through this. She's absolutely fantastic on the legislative side. I can't say enough great things about her.
And
Thank you, Charles.
And please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And we will see you next week. Labor Vision Podcast, American Workers First. Peace out.